trained. Quite a lot of them say that skills and training are not sufficient for the management, and even for a little part of them that staff isn't trained. And again, we have a lot of them not responding, which is not a very good sign when we are like here talking about human resources. I have to move constantly to the, or maybe I just ask you to, next slide, please. So in 2012, regional organizations, VVF, the IUCN Med, MedPAN, EUROPARC, and others joined together to develop a joint capacity building strategy to better coordinate the regional effort of organization of the capacity building community in the Med to try to enhance the management of Mediterranean MPAs. And now we have, of course, the feeling that this joint capacity building needs to be improved, enhanced. We need to go further. Next slide, please. From our side in the MedPAN as a network, one of the things we would like to achieve, and we have started, we are gradually implementing for now a couple of years. We are gradually setting up a regular training program for Mediterranean MPAs, trying to follow a partnership approach, meaning that we are not here to develop training modules only by ourselves, but also the idea is to integrate the training effort and modules that are developed by other partners also in a joint catalog of training. And it's also to implement this regular training program across several MPAs that you can see here on the map acting as training centers. So it's to try not to implement training as one-off, but repeat the training over time, knowing that the need is, of course, recurrent. And this is one of the ways we believe is very important to scale up the effort of capacity building. So, as you know, this session, like other sessions, has as a main purpose to contribute to the roadmap. So you heard about the roadmap. I'm not going to explain you what is this roadmap again, but mainly, so you know that in this roadmap, there is this roadmap strategic objective number 4 that is about capacity building. And we identified that this session more particularly relates to very explicitly to the first, well, to the recommendation 4.5, that is to strengthen the coordination of MPA capacity building activities between regional organizations and national authorities through the provision of standardized user-friendly guidelines and complementary operational training programs. And also to the recommendation 4.1 to provide communication toolkits. And somehow also to other recommendations, but in the discussion that will follow the two presentations, we will suggest that we focus mainly on the two first, the 4.5 and the 4.1. We can go to the next slide, please. On peut passer à la slide suivante, s'il vous plaît. Ouais. Ah. OK. Ah, ok. Vous pouvez aller à la slide suivante aussi, s'il vous plaît. So this session will be introduced by two presentations, one on Mediterranean participatory tools to engage in biodiversity protection. And I will give the floor now to Sonsoles at San Roman, and I think our colleague Federica Foglini will be, well, hopefully online, but I'm not sure now if she will be able to join.
Yes,
okay.
I'm here.
Ah, you're here, perfect, yes. Federica. No, it's just that we had technical issues and we were not sure that people would be able to attend online.
Okay.
But perfect if you're here. and followed by a presentation, another 10-minute presentation by Neil McIntosh on the Life Enable. MedPAN is partner of this Life Enable to establish the European Nature Academy for blended learning and capacity building included in marine protected areas. So, Sonsoles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierre. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here this morning with us. As Pierre says, I'm Sonsoles. I'm working for the University of Malaga, and we're coordinating an initiative that is called the Mediterranean Biodiversity Protection Community, that it tries to enhance the capacity of the different partners involved in biodiversity conservation. Now, while we open my presentation, I want to reflect a bit on what Pierre said about the answers to the survey. And we're talking about capacity building, but we know also that MPAs are very much understaffed. So I think one of the main challenges to deliver this capacity building is for them to find the time and the resources to actually benefit from them. So the project I was talking about is quite interesting in the sense of a huge effort to try to coordinate different initiatives. So the project purpose is to build on the knowledge and the tools developed by a community of 17 different projects with different themes, and they're active in the biodiversity protection issues. So I've brought a couple of copies that you can have a look at. This is a catalog of monitoring, management, and geospatial tools that have been developed by the different projects. And the idea is to bring together in one page a summary of what MPA managers can do to either monitor several aspects like climate change or marine litter impact, etc., or water quality, or finding methodologies to approach different stakeholders for participatory management approaches. Now, if I may have my presentation, maybe we can go a bit deeper into the recommendations and the actions that we thought could be relevant for the session. I can add also in the meantime that the catalog of tools at the moment is, you have a printed copy to look at. We have it in several languages. We understand that English is not always accessible by everybody. So we made an effort to have it ready in French, in Spanish, in Arabic, and we are trying to update it continuously with the results of different projects. Related to this, there's a new initiative, NECBC Med, that is also trying to collect the best tools and results and opportunities offered by other stakeholders and bring them together so you have one access point to a wide variety of opportunities. Now, knowing that we're going digital as well, we're trying to develop an interactive online version of the tool. So if you're only interested in monitoring, you just go monitoring tools. Interested in management, you go management. Interested in spatial data platforms, then you can click on that and be more targeted in your search to fill a particular gap. So the three recommendations that Pierre was mentioning earlier, I think they're very much related to the work we're trying to do. We're trying to coordinate among the different partners involved in these projects and bring them together so we do not duplicate. We try to organize meetings back to back. We try to share the information so we can edit each other somehow and enrich our common results. And we are also building, in addition to the catalog of tools, a Mediterranean biodiversity protection knowledge platform where you will have access also to the latest scientific evidence related to biodiversity protection, to spatial data and maps on what we know, for instance, about the presence of Posidonia oceanica seagrass banquets and dunes and marine litter monitoring activities, there's a wide variety of contents that could serve MPA managers. Thank you. So this is what I just mentioned earlier. I don't want to extend much, but this is to show you the richness of the different projects and themes that are addressed within the community, the Mediterranean biodiversity protection community. There are lots of partners and networks involved, and I invite you to just go to the webpage if you want to know more about each single project. We are a community, as you can say. We need to work together, and we're linked somehow through partners and topics. Next slide, please. Okay, this is again what we mentioned. This is a snapshot of what the biodiversity protection knowledge platform looks like and the different types of contents you can have. You have also videos of training webinars, etc., that you can watch. You have documents, you have maps, you can prepare your own maps. There's a wide variety of things. Excuse me, you have the catalog that I just showed you around, and we're developing an interactive version online. We're also working with other communities in the InterRegMed world related to efficient buildings, related to sustainable tourism, to other topics, to try and come together and develop what we call the Med Academy. So it's a cross-cutting issues, trying to have a multi-stakeholder approach to biodiversity protection. Again, we'll go quickly through this because it might not be relevant to our discussion, as we need to be rather focused. But before everything, what we want to agree through the declaration of an ecosystem-based approach to biodiversity protection is building a common vision. We need to first agree that we all have a responsibility somehow to protect biodiversity, and therefore a role to play. Again, this is a summary of the 3 recommendations that Peter just mentioned. So I'm going to go to the next one, please. Okay. So again, this is the strategic objective under which the recommendations are focused. Is building the capacity of marine protected area managers, staff and stakeholders, and communicate on MPA values to larger external audiences to raise their awareness. These are, let's say, the lessons learned somehow from the experience that we had in this huge effort to coordinate the work of several projects. So we see a clear need for harmonization. We're all doing things, but we're doing it differently. So somehow, if we want to work together, we need to find a common ground to move forward. The needs of training and capacity building are really, really different depending on where we are. And this needs to be taken into account. We need to take the benefit of new technologies and online resources to get farther away. And we're trying to catch up on that. The socioeconomic dimensions in the Mediterranean are also very colorful. So we need to keep that in mind while developing our capacity building activities. The formal training needs to be definitely complemented by bilateral exchanges, and bringing together, like today in the MPA Forum, all these community and talking to each other, I think is a way to build our capacity as well. From our point of view also, an issue that we should keep into the mind is the demand-driven capacity building actions are more effective than when you are asked and obliged to follow them. And here I will mention the example of the Ministry of Montenegro, with whom we've been working to develop training workshops that became webinars because of the pandemics. But basically it's working together with them, saying, what do you need from us? Which kind of training? And to make it tailor-made for their needs. So we worked on marine litter monitoring. We worked on climate change protocols. And we're going to be developing another webinar on governance mechanisms for the management of the newly protected areas. Again, as I mentioned earlier, a multi-stakeholder approach. We need to involve different actors that affect your marine protected area. We need to work with the private sector, with the tourist sector, with the cruising sector. I mean, we have to work with many different actors to be effective. And again, this leads to the last comment on the need to co-manage and consult with each other, create a dialogue to move forward. MPAs are everybody's business, as the slogan was. Next slide, please. And here, as I mentioned, in the catalog of tools for to help and assist the marine protected area managers, one of the key components related to innovation and digitalization is the option for MPA managers to use geoportals and online tools to help manage and understand what's going on in their areas. So at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague Federica Foglini, who is online, to present this geoportal tool that was implemented and is has been adopted by 9 pilot sites, but I think it's up to her to tell us what it's all about.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, because okay, good morning, everybody. I'm very sorry not to be there with you. And I would like to very briefly show the geoportal that we implemented for the Amare project. And we are integrating in the Amare Plus with 9 more MPAs, as Sonsoles was saying. Here you see in this map the new MPAs that are now part of the Amare Plus project. And the idea is to transfer these tools. That is, of course, a way of managing the raw MPAs, of sharing data, of homogenizing data, because the main idea behind these tools is to having a framework for being really able to create a standard tools for going towards a real network of MPAs. So here you see the different components of these tools. We started with the conceptual model in order to be able to really be standard as much as possible. So the conceptual model starts from the inspired data specifications in order to be standard also with the European, let's say, directives. And in this way, we implemented a logical data model that enable the structure, the infrastructure, to really be homogeneous for all the MPAs, and to be also as much flexible as possible in order to integrate the data that are needed from the MPAs. From the logical data model, we implemented a physical model. That means a geodatabases with different thematic layers storing the different spatial data. Together with the geospatial tool, we also implemented a metadata catalog that is also very important to be able, first of all, to search the data and to make the data as much fair as possible. What does this mean? That these data are findable, are interoperable, and are reusable from other MPAs and other people. In this slide, you see what happens from the implementation of the geodatabases. We create symbology for the different thematic layers. We created the geoportal and the web app for each MPA. So each MPA has its own specific web app application with its own data and tools to be used. And together here you see the metadata compilation. So the geoportal catalog, that is really important to be able also to acknowledge the data sources, acknowledge the data owners, and to know everything about the data we are managing. Next slide, please. In the next slide, okay, you see again in detail these different components, starting from the data collection. So what we did at the beginning, what we are doing now with the new MPAs is to try to understand the availability of data. The data are very different from different MPAs, but sometimes are not. And this effort is done to make the infrastructure as homogeneous as possible for all the MPAs, but following the needs of the MPAs. So we have an interview with the different MPAs to understanding the state of the art, what are their needs in terms of monitoring, in terms of management, in order to create a useful tools for the MPA managers. Starting from these steps, the data collection, we are going to update the data model that we created for the AMARE projects before going to the implementation of the geodatabase. Here you see an example of how is a geodatabase. You have different thematic layers. You have information about the administration of the MPAs, about the habitats and biotypes, about the biodiversities, about the human threats, about the basic cartographic information. So everything that could be useful. Then you have the geoportal itself. Here you see an example of an MPA that was involved in the AMARE project. It is a Porto Cesario. You see on the left the list of the layers, and then different tools, special tools that in this geoportal are very easy to use. I want also to mention the fact that within the AMARE, we are going to do some trainings for the MPAs managers and people working there in order to really be able to transfer this knowledge and to transfer the possibility of using effectively these tools. Here you see also the metadata catalog, where you are able to search the data in a free way, and you're able to know everything about your data. And here you see how is the aspect of the geoportal. When you enter the geoportal, you have a list of MPAs. Here you see the red dots. You can click on these dots, go on your MPAs and start playing with it. Unfortunately, today there is not enough time to give you a live demo, also because this mixed way of presentation. But here you see the link of the AMARE geoportal, so you are able to enter and to play with it. Of course, the AMARE Plus is still, let's say, on work in progress, because we are implementing with new data and with new MPAs. But please have a look at it, and if you have any doubts and questions, you can come back to me. Thank you very much for the attention. And I leave the floor again to Sonsoles for the next step.
Thank you, Federica. Please stay with us, so there might be questions raising for you.
Of course.
After the discussion. Thank you. So now we're going to the next slide that is focused on actions. Here I try to illustrate the kind of actions that we are developing under this Mediterranean Biodiversity Protection Community. As I mentioned earlier, we have the platform and the catalog of tools that will be updated continuously, at least for the next 2 years. So we invite you to tell me which tools you would like to see there, if you have anything that is really worth including, and we'll try to promote it and have it available in different languages. We want, of course, to engage more marine protected areas in the use of these innovative and online tools like the geoportal mentioned by Federica, but also other methodologies that have been tested by different projects and organizations. And the recommendation 4.2 to strengthen the coordination of the capacity building activities. We are promoting collaboration with other projects and initiatives, as I mentioned earlier, at different scales. We talked about Montenegro and these tailor-made training opportunities. With the Pelago Sanctuary as well, we are consulting with our community of projects to see how we can feed content and methodologies and expertise into the management and action plan that is going to be approved in mid-December in Rome. It's an ambitious management plan for the Pelago Sanctuary shared between 3 countries. The Cette projects, the NECBC Med initiative that I mentioned earlier, is also trying to enhance the capacities of marine protected areas by linking also coastal municipalities and cities and having them involved in the actual management of the areas. And under recommendation 4.6 on training MPA managers, staff and local stakeholders, our idea again, like why I'm here today, is try to transfer what we've learned through this exercise and also try to foster new alliances and see how we can better work together to move forward in this skills development for MPA managers, but not only MPA managers. I think everybody needs to learn a little bit so to finally have a better impact. So on indicators, that this is another aspect of the roadmap that we should be looking at. I was reading the proposal that was included in the draft roadmap, and all of a sudden I thought, indicators feasible at what level? I mean, at project level, as we all know, at institutional level, it's quite easy to follow. you can monitor the impact of your activities and find some indicators. At national level, yeah, maybe we can do so, but we're talking about the Mediterranean. How can we identify indicators that tell us that we're going forward in the good direction with the capacity training activities? Because the countries are very different and the capacity training needs and opportunities, let's say the offer, is wider in some regions than others. So we need to take that into account while choosing our indicators and measuring the level of success. So basically, I adopted all the indicators that were suggested in the initial draft, just did some minor changes, but I think in general, yes, that we need to monitor what is going on at the regional level, at least if this is the purpose for a Mediterranean dimension. For the partnerships, I wondered myself also, which kind of partnerships do we need to work at Mediterranean level? If you want to be effective, you need to be on the ground. You need to be with the people. So you need to be flexible and be able to develop skill enhancement actions at local level. So again, I wondered the partnerships, how they could be implemented at Mediterranean or regional level. We need to be thinking about an horizontal partnerships from the really top, the public authorities, the international institutions, preparing the background or facilitating basically the local action that will happen on the ground. And when you are on the ground, you need to ally with all sorts of multi-stakeholders that you have around. One of the tools that was developed was the environmental contracts, for instance, is a methodology on how to consult and involve the different actors and economic sectors that are using your natural resource to explain and make them realize that we need to go for a win-win situation where no one loses, but we're still protecting biodiversity. So these as in the actions earlier, are based on the draft roadmap and the contents that were already there. I just had a thought about the challenge of having these partnerships made at different levels. But in our community, I think the good strategy is to ally with good networks, because the networks can always transfer at local level and get farther than you are only working locally somehow. But again, I think horizontal and vertical partnerships are necessary. And then last night, before I went to bed, I thought, okay, did I finish my presentation? Was everything there? And I thought, oh, maybe not. And I had some brainstorming after 2 glasses of wine, I must say. And I wrote this. I said, okay, let's think about what is making me interested in capacity building. How can I make it work in the following years? And I just wrote a series of statements or let's say food for thought that could maybe fit into our discussions today. I know that Neil has answers to some of these questions, so I think it would be better for Neil to follow up, and maybe through his presentation, we will find a good answer to this. I believe this is the last one, and I thank you for listening. So Neil.
Thank you very much, Sonsoles, for indeed giving this really good food for thought. Take good note of this compilation you have made of ideas and thoughts under these 3 questions, which I want to remind you at this stage before giving the floor to Neil. In the discussion, in relation to mainly these 2 recommendations that we will again show on the screen when discussing. What are the actions that should be taken to make these recommendations achievable in the next coming years? What are the key partnerships we should think of to make it happen? And then add an option, the question of the indicators. But we believe that if we manage to find some good, to identify key actions and key partnerships that are needed to implement, the question of the indicator will follow very naturally. But Neil will give us more food for thought now through his presentation. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. I don't know if I need it. I speak quite loudly. So my name is Neil McIntosh and I'm from the EUROPARC Federation. I'm the project manager for a new project. So it's maybe a bit premature to present it as a case study. but we're building on a previous project which has a lot of the common ingredients there as well. So I'll just need my presentation, please. It's coming, it's coming. But first of all, maybe just a comment. Yeah, 10 minutes. Time is a relative concept, Pierre, so we'll see how we do. Exactly. But I'll try and catch up a little bit of time. I also had a question for you to start thinking about capacity building. When was the last time that you undertook a training course in connection with your work? Was it a long time ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Have you ever had training as part of your work? Yeah, a few nods, but yeah, Martina's sitting here. Martina was our star pupil, and okay. But I think if we were to take a wider representation, of course, we're in a workshop which is talking about capacity building. So you have an interest, you have a stake already, yeah? But I think if you were to probe a bit further with protected area managers and marine protected area managers, I think it would be less obvious how much training they actually receive. So maybe this project that it started in August to establish the European Nature Academy for blended learning, so online and face-to-face, COVID permitting, for capacity building, including in marine protected areas. So if I could have the next slide, please. I wanted to give just a little bit of context. Why is this project needed? And it dovetails very nicely with the roadmap. We heard yesterday in the plenary session that marine managers have to navigate a really complex landscape of policies, priorities, initiatives, conventions, declarations. It goes on forever, the list, and these all contain many targets, which unfortunately come and go and very often aren't reached. They're not achieved. So for protected area managers, I think the question is, especially in relation to capacity building, how can we improve our management effectiveness in order to progress, in order to make some progress towards achieving those targets? And at the heart of Life Enable, we're taking a competence-based approach to management effectiveness. So that competence-based approach follows on the lead from IUCN. They prepared a really excellent document called the Global Register of Competencies for Protected Area Practitioners. And we've used that as the basis to inform the content of what we're going to deliver within Life Enable. And by competence, we mean that mix of skills, knowledge, and attitude which are required to do your job well, basically. We've discovered, and we already know, that technical knowledge is essential, but it's not enough. So what we want to focus on is how can we deliver capacity building, which is both practical and focused on the needs of protected area managers in the marine environment. Next slide, please. So just very, very briefly, Life Enable is a new project. EUROPARC is in the lead. We're working with 7 partners across the whole of Europe. And of course, MedPAN is one of the partners. EUROPARC has been looking for an excuse to work with MedPAN for many, many years. So this is the perfect vehicle for us. It builds on the successes of Life eNatura 2000, or Life Edu for short. You can find all of the resources from that project on the EUROPARC website. And if you want to get a participant's perspective, I'm sure Martina will be able to tell you more eloquently than I could what it was like to be involved in that project. The European Nature Academy will involve establishing a MOOC, so a learning platform, a training hub, which will be accessible by thousands of nature managers, so marine managers, but also other managers of other types of habitats and other species. Within the scope of the project, it lasts for 3 years. We're going to develop 3 purpose-built, very specific courses that we think will enable, hence the name, enable protected area managers to do their daily work in a more efficient and more coordinated way. The slide there gives an indication of the types of courses that are going to be provided. As you can see from the types of courses: personal communication, stakeholder engagement, governance, applied conservation, biology, etc. They're organized in 4 learning programs, but we're looking very much at what are the core competencies, the really essential competencies that protected area managers need to know and to be able to do in their daily work. We all know that the managers of marine protected areas are very qualified in terms of their technical knowledge, but they really struggle with basic things like, how do I deal with the fishing community that are active in my protected area, etc. We'll develop some practical tools as well, so that each individual can gain an insight into what their actual training needs are. So there will be this training needs analysis tool. From the intake of 150 core participants, there will be opportunities for many, many more managers to work with, but we'll do a selection process and pick 150 managers. And of them, there will be 20 who can go on, if they wish, to become trained as trainers. So I'm looking at Martine because I have ambitions. And in turn, they will be able to mobilize the wider MPA community. So we want these trainers, once they're trained to be trainers, to be able to go to their organization, to their national park, to their team, and cascade the knowledge that they have acquired through their participation in Life Enable. All of this will be governed by a set of protocols and quality standards. So we really think that's super important, that we can attest to the quality of the capacity building activities that have been delivered through the project. And I'll come onto that in a little bit more detail later. So 3 minutes. I'm laughing at Pierre. Could I have the, oh yeah, thank you. So I really see Life Enable as being the how to the roadmap's what. So the project outcomes, the project will conclude in 2024, but it will have a legacy that goes on beyond 2024. So it's pretty coterminous with the process of implementation and development of the roadmap. The courses go to the heart of the communication toolkit. They will immeasurably improve the competencies that managers need in dealing with stakeholders and setting up participative models and inclusive models to govern their marine protected areas. The Nature Academy in itself will be a primary coordination, will play a primary coordination function. So it won't be just for EUROPARC or the partners that are involved. It will be for everybody who wants to use that and contribute to it. There will be a library of resources, which again, according to the protocols and standards, we will sort of filter for quality and relevance to what the managers actually need. And just a very quick mention to some of the other strategic objectives and recommendations that Life Enable will contribute to. Next slide, please. So I think this quote is really eloquent, and I think it's really elegant. We know that if we speak in the language of those that we want to reach, we will have a better chance of success. And that applies at operational level. There's no point as a marine manager in talking about declarations, conventions, targets to, I don't know, a stakeholder that's active in your marine protected area. They just won't understand. So we need to cut through the mumbo jumbo. We need to cut through the jargon, but we also need to develop a language as capacity building initiators so that we can generate the funds necessary for sustainable funding in future, so that we can talk the game with the investors of projects, but also those that will be willing to make a financial contribution to the training that we can offer. So we need to, we need to use some very sort of hard economic language as well. And one of the key products of Life Enable will be a feasibility study, and that feasibility study will not only measure what the impact of the project has been in terms of what have been the benefits for the participants to the project, but also in a general sense, has the project met its overall objectives in terms of delivering capacity building, which can be sustainable, which can be scaled up, which can be replicated at a much larger level. Okay, next slide, please. So this basically repeats what or how Life Enable will build these capacities. So it's competence-based. We'll be looking to improve management effectiveness, which can then in turn have an impact on operational and organizational effectiveness, so organizational performance. It'll be responsive to people's needs, to the manager's needs, and flexible, being provided online. It means that we can reach greater numbers of managers at times that suit them. It's also more sustainable for the environment. So you don't need to participate. You don't need to take time out away from work and go to a training event, which will have a finite capacity. We will never be able to reach enough managers. So this has the real potential, we hope, to reach many, many thousands of managers. And these rollout mechanisms, according to the protocols and standards, will then in turn enable many more managers to come on board. And I should say that our ambition for the MOOC, for the learning platform, the training hub, is that the resources and the content will be available in a variety of languages. We're at the stage where we're trying to see whether that's going to be technically possible and also affordable, to be honest. That's a real challenge, especially, you know, in a European level, when you think of the languages. And we know that managers, especially the ones that participate in the project, might be quite good with their English and comfortable working in English, but many of their colleagues back in their organization perhaps aren't. So if, thinking back to Nelson Mandela, if we can speak in the language that they understand, it will increase the chances of having a positive impact. And just a final point here, I think the investment that is required, it's important to see capacity building as an investment in people and organizations. It's not just a blank cost. It's not just like, 500 euros for some training that you go to. It's actually an investment in a continuous process of professional development. So that's the case that we want to make through Life Enable. And some of the, I call them impact measures, many are quantifiable and they're easy, you know, so number of participants, number of training courses, the types of organizations that have participated. They can all be quantified. But there's more qualitative measures which are perhaps more challenging. So you're needing to probe a little bit deeper in terms of how has the learning, positively or not, impacted on you and how you work in your daily life. Have you been able to realize sort of follow-on projects? And I know Martina and another colleague from Life Edu are currently working on a new project proposal because of their experience in Life Edu. And there's also a need to measure the types of organizations that are involved that we're speaking to, and how do we get them to become involved in the capacity building initiatives. It would be ideal that we provide training not only for marine managers in the traditional sense, but the marine managers and the stakeholders that they interact with, so that we can take an integrated approach that could be potentially hugely impactful. Next slide, please. Final slide, Pierre. So yeah, we need to reach out. We need to, we live in a connected world. There's, within all the policies, within all the conventions, within all the directives, there's a common theme, which is about the need for working in greater integrated ways, more integrated ways, so that we can realize those synergies. And I think there is a legitimate question that we should reflect on. We won't be able to answer it just now, but who are the stakeholders that we work with on a daily basis who aren't at the forum? And why not? You know, maybe were they asked? And if they were asked, why didn't they come? Maybe because they don't prioritize marine protection. And that's something we need to reflect on, because that involves us in a process of education to say, look, marine protected areas matter, and let me explain why they matter. There will be, in terms of the alliances, I like to think of partnerships as being alliances for nature rather than formal structured partnerships. They're very fluid concepts. So the typical actors are network organizations because of their scope of reach, but not only because of the capacity that they have to engage many, many organizations or individuals, but because the networks themselves, especially, for example, EUROPARC and MedPAN, we treat the members of our organizations as each other's resource. They have experience, they have knowledge, they have projects which they can then share with their colleagues, either around the Mediterranean or around Europe. There is a tendency, even within our own community, so those that are engaged in marine protection, to still think in terms of silos. So the academic community will be very comfortable speaking with other academics. The networking community will be comfortable speaking with other networks. We need to break those silos down, because that is the death knell for effective capacity building, in my view. And yeah, we need to reach out to the other sectors as well. So I think that's it, unless there's another slide which I can't remember. I didn't do an extra slide. No, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Neil. Like for Sonsoles, thanks for making this effort. We know it's not so easy to turning the presentation of your case studies really towards the roadmap and in like very explicit relation to the questions we want to now debate with you under the two recommendations that are mainly identified here for the session. Maybe I will ask, est-ce qu'il est possible de revenir sur la toute première présentation d'intro? Après le merci, il y a les recommandations qui sont affichées. We will just share with you on the screen again these recommendations, and and questions. We will probably start discussing the first one, that is like, how do we get a stronger coordination of our capacity building initiatives, meaning regional capacity building initiatives, but how do we, and this is what is also stands in this recommendation, it's also how do we also ensure that our regional capacity building initiatives are connected also with the national level. We believe it's important because as a regional capacity building suppliers, organizations, too often we feel that we are not right on the target, that we provide training and back home, the knowledge, the technical skill that was developed during the training is not implementable just because we missed out that there are constraints, institutional constraints back home that are preventing the implementation of the training. So definitely that's why I think in this recommendation, it's very important to think of like regional capacity building, but how can we also strengthen the link with the national levels, with local context, to ensure that what we do, this effort is not lost just because it was not fitting the need. Is it possible to have on the screen, please? It's coming. Okay, but I guess you have in mind this recommendation that will be again, and the 3 questions we would like to have your now your thoughts on them. What actions, kind of like operational actions, can we think of to make this recommendation achievable, actionable in the next coming years? And what are the key partnerships for a stronger coordination of capacity building in the Med? Who would like to?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank all the presenters now, I mean, from Malaga, from Germany. I found it very interesting. And I personally have been involved in this business for maybe all my life. So I strongly believe in the issue of capacity building is a continuous process. Having said that, I would like to use your words by saying effective capacity building, blah, 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 communication language. Without proper communication language, the capacity building will not be appropriate. Why I'm saying this, I don't mean the language is English or French. The language is when you communicate with different sectors, you don't tell them, I want this and this because this is a management plan, we have to do blah, 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 blah. No, you have to listen to these people, this is number one, and use their own words, their own needs. I don't want to go in details, but certainly the communication language that I use now, I don't talk about biodiversity. I talk about biodiversity as investment, biodiversity as gender issue, biodiversity as education, biodiversity as whatever, etc. This is the communication language that you could be used. Having said this, I get a little bit confused between capacity building and capacity development. I know the difference, but certainly what you are offered here is almost capacity development rather than capacity building. We have to differentiate between both of them, because capacity development, it is a proper allocation of resources in a very simple way. That means that whether technical, financial, whatever. And again, I personally feel, based on what I've seen now, the whole issue of this session should be one of the most important sessions in the whole forum, because it covers almost not only strategic objectives 4, it is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Yeah. How can you highlight this in a way that you can catch or capture the decision makers in that? I mean, I have been a decision makers for almost now, God knows, 20 years, for example. But from their own point of view, whenever someone's come and say, I'm going for a training or capacity building and blah, 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 and then the next month go for another one, they always say, haven't you have enough? All the time you are going for capacity building, whatever, etc. And as you rightly said, you said very clear, you have the knowledge, you have the capacity, but you cannot implement them because you don't have the resources on the ground. So all what I'm trying to say, we have to differentiate between capacity building and capacity development.
Or maybe we have to set this recommendation and what we are pointing at as like proactive, inclusive, multi-stakeholder, very ambitious approach to capacity building, which stands in the world scaling up, that is towards capacity development, meaning provide the individuals, but also the organizations with the means and skills to achieve their own objectives, which is capacity development.
That's right.
But this is very ambitious. So my question here is, we know the limitations of or like capacity building community, and we know also what are the these limitations and institutional limitations to our effort, where it gets lost sometime because we missed out the target. We didn't know enough what was the context of implementation when back home. We didn't maybe include, we were not inclusive enough embarking in our capacity building activities, not only the MPA manager, but as was stressed in your presentations, as you are saying, the whole community that needs to be considered for making things change. But so how can we do this in terms of processes and tools? For example, just a question, how do we better identify needs in terms of capacity building? How do we better identify contextual and institutional limitations so as to ensure that what we deliver is targeting the needs and not only of the manager, but of a full community of stakeholders? This is very ambitious. We certainly need some kind of processes and tools to do this. What can they be? You mentioned, and I don't know who among you knows this very good tool that you mentioned and that was used already in the Life Edu and will be in the Life Enable. That is the Global Register of Competencies that was developed by the IUCN. This tool, to me, we are not using it enough because this tool is already scanning all the competencies that are needed for PA management, but across all the categories of staff. So then it doesn't really go on stakeholders, non-technical, let's say, stakeholders, but already from the political level to the field, going through the administrative communication staff, all the competencies. One thing we should do, and we are partly going to do it and pursue this work you started in the Life Edu, is to use this tool, maybe make it a little more marine, a little more Mediterranean here and there, which I think is probably needed. But we should adopt a tool like this, maybe have a technology to use it, you know, and maybe have a kind of repository for recording, you know, and collecting constantly the needs of the different categories of staff. I don't know what is your feeling about this. Mais en français, est-ce que finalement ça marche là?
Oui.
Donc,
je peux parler l'anglais, mais ça va prendre un peu plus de temps. Donc, j'étais un peu en retard, c'est pour un problème logistique, mais c'est un sujet qui m'intéresse beaucoup et je trouve que par expérience, en tant que président d'une association en Tunisie, donc je dirais que nous avons commencé par exemple à préparer une base de données, comme vous êtes en train de dire, qui réunit tous les stakeholders. Donc, y compris les gens de la communauté qui ont un savoir-faire à partager, qui ont des connaissances à partager. Et c'est ça ce qu'on appelle art of knowledge. On doit travailler sur ça. Donc, pour voir un peu qu'est-ce qu'on a. C'est une étude diagnostique de ce qu'on a sur le terrain pour voir quels sont les besoins, qui on va former, pourquoi on va les former et quel va être leur rôle. C'est ça. Donc, c'est une sorte de préparation d'une étude diagnostique qui sera faite dans cette MPA. Ça, c'est le premier point. Deuxième point, pour les communautés femmes et hommes pêcheurs, par exemple, nous avons créé des tools, des jeux, des petites bouclettes en langage tunisien, par exemple. Donc, c'est le language of the community. Et ça a été très, très bien apprécié. Donc, des questions-réponses. Comment vous faites la collecte de palourdes? Comment vous préservez? Quelle est la saison? Etc. Et on a fait des jeux de la biodiversité. Un jeu de la biodiversité. Quelle est la biodiversité des îles CNES? Ça se fait avec les jeux pour les jeunes, pour les moins jeunes. On a fait un quiz. Questions-réponses. Et le dernier projet avec MedPAN, on a fait une sorte de petite carte. J'en ai donné à Puri. Qu'est-ce que c'est l'île CNES? Qu'est-ce que vous devez, comment vous devez la protéger? C'est des petites choses de rien du tout que même le jeune enfant peut le lire pour sa mère ou son père. Donc, c'est ça les petits tools concernant l'évaluation.
Je vous coupe, ce que j'entends peut-être comme point à retenir déjà pour nous, parce qu'on parle de renforcement des capacités, de développement des capacités sur des initiatives régionales, nationales, mais au niveau local également, les actions qui peuvent être identifiées, comme vous êtes en train de partager avec nous votre expérience tunisienne, sont très importantes à considérer, parce que c'est vrai que ce que vous disiez, commencer par faire un mapping des stakeholders et de leurs besoins très localement, est sans doute un premier pas, et quelque chose qui peut être, it's probably mapping, stakeholders and their needs, something that can be done here locally and probably in a different way, at different level, also is something that is needed logically to better address needs. We need to identify them and across the different categories of stakeholders. So it's indeed like really good that you have.
Donc, on ne s'est pas arrêté à ce point de base de données locale. On est passé pour la base de données de scientifiques, d'experts, donc des autres stakeholders, aussi dans le gouvernement. Donc, pour faire cette grande base de données où toutes les personnes qui sont concernées par la gestion ou la cogestion de cette aire marine protégée, pour l'évaluation après formation, après training, qu'est-ce que vous allez trouver? On devrait trouver des indicateurs de changement, d'un impact, changement dans le comportement des jeunes, comment ils travaillent dans la cogestion, des managers, comment ils travaillent, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont réussi. Et c'est ça, c'est un indicateur de réussite, c'est un indicateur de suivi pour voir qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait sur le site après la formation. Donc, on fait une sorte d'évaluation, fiche et d'évaluation théorique et puis pratique sur le terrain. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for the presentation, very rich, very interesting. There is one point that I would like to stress, that is our MPAs, they are understaffed. So whatever training you give, then you have a challenge. And the issue is that managing protected area is not only what your staff can do, but what other stakeholders can do. And here there is an issue of blending training and capacity building with other stakeholders. So I think that we have to reflect about our tool, our experiences. Just don't stay confined into the protected area, into our managers, but try to look to reach other people that are around the protected area and that are key stakeholders. When we discuss about co-management, we are discussing about how we enable other actors to play an active role. So how capacity building, training, sharing experiences can also reach these stakeholders. So an hotel is very interested in the quality of the sea. how he can be involved with the protected area to ensure that even if the protected area is understaffed, there is another stakeholder that is proactive. So I think that there is an issue in terms of our recommendation of blending more what we do in targeting the protected area with the surrounding community of stakeholders and resource users. And here we have to be very careful not to confine ourselves just working on our small understaffed protected area, because there is a community around that we need to target in some way. And so we have to be very developing very nice and creative way to reach for these people that have a different language, different understanding, and different perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. It's absolutely key. I think it's also very much connected with what you are saying. A blended approach is needed, scaling up here, and the big challenge is certainly to reach out outside of the MPA staff towards like the communities of stakeholders in our capacity building initiatives. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with what the gentleman just said. We need to develop inclusive capacity building strategies so that we can mobilize the knowledge and the experience of the stakeholders, many of whom have lived locally, know the area that we are protecting. So we can form that as an important alliance. And the terrestrial world, the terrestrial setting, has had many years of variable experience along those lines. So if you think of dealing with nature protection, dealing with private landowners, dealing with farmers, dealing with foresters, it's the same issues. And it's not that they are the enemy. We need to stop thinking about stakeholders as being opposed to what we want to achieve for nature. It's maybe just that they don't understand. So how do we enable them to come on board? How can we share? And then I fully agree with what this gentleman was saying as well. It's what Puri said yesterday. We're engaged in a business where we have to talk in terms of hearts and minds. We have to ignite passions. And protected area managers often come into an area which they have no connection with in very few cases. They can go back home. But in most cases, they come from an academic institution into a protected area and no real connection with that apart from the quality of the nature that they're trying to protect. And from the people that live there, they think, who are you? Who are you to come in and tell me what to do to protect this nature? I know, I know what I need to do. So they need to form that alliance. And absolutely, communication is 90% listening. Unless you're prepared to go and listen to what your stakeholders have to say, you will never achieve your priorities for nature.
We can maybe allow just a few minutes to, and I put it on the screen, still it's very much interconnected, and particularly with, I think, what was just said, this other recommendation that was here. And when we are talking about the toolkits, beyond the idea of toolkits, is finally how do we equip the MPAs with tools that will help them promote the value of their MPA. So what is underlying here is that will help them go to the communities of the stakeholders and better engage in the MPA and the conservation. So I guess here is also a recommendation that fits very well with what was said. Any thoughts, again, keeping in mind the three questions on the partnerships, where do we achieve this? So basically, embarking the stakeholders means that we give tools to MPAs so that they can turn to their communities of stakeholders, that we try also to make some kind of effort to map the communities of stakeholders around the MPAs and maybe equip the MPAs for mapping, basing on experience like your experience and what you have done. We can maybe capitalize on these experiences and share some kind of turnkey tools that will help the MPAs to better understand. Maybe that is another layer of information that could be on the geoportal, the communities of stakeholders on the MRA. It is already there on MRA. Okay, that's interesting. MRA is a very good turnkey tools where MPAs can use indeed to also maybe better increase their knowledge on their communities of stakeholders. Yes.
Thank you very much. I will continue in English. No, in French, sorry. Je pense que c'est important par rapport à tout ce que je viens d'entendre là, et je pense que c'est important de soulever les difficultés rencontrées dans chaque AMP. Quels sont les besoins avec les difficultés et quels sont les moyens qui ont été trouvés par chacune des AMP pour contrecarrer, pour trouver les solutions à ces difficultés. C'est-à-dire que chaque AMP a toujours, on trouve dans les AMP à peu près toujours les mêmes problèmes. Et puis, il y en a certaines d'entre elles qui ont pu trouver des solutions. Et je pense qu'on ne développe pas assez ce dispositif de partage des solutions trouvées après de nombreuses galères, hein, après de nombreuses années de difficultés. Et quand pour une fois qu'on a trouvé une solution, je pense que c'est dommage de ne pas la partager davantage. Alors, c'est très bien de faire appel à de nombreux partenaires, experts, scientifiques, etc., etc., etc. Mais à l'intérieur, c'est ce que disait monsieur tout à l'heure, à l'intérieur, on a le même langage, on a la même conviction, on a la même passion. Hein. Et donc, autant profiter de ces petits bouts d'expérience qui ont été positifs pour dire, voilà, nous, on a réussi à trouver ça. Bon, ça a marché. Bon, peut-être, vous pouvez l'essayer aussi. Voilà, à mon avis, c'est un partage aussi par rapport au problème. On approche la solution par quels sont les problèmes que j'ai à gérer, quelles sont les difficultés que je rencontre et comment est-ce que vous avez réussi à répondre à ça. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Yes, Sana. Mais ce que tu dis et ce que disait aussi donc Neil tout à l'heure, la ressource est à l'intérieur même et c'est finalement le principe et l'ADN de nos réseaux. Networks are based on peer-to-peer, on each is a resource to the other, as you said earlier, and this is obviously another very strong mean of building capacity and providing solutions, sharing case studies.
I think that we should add something, is the know-how of the communities, their experience, their knowledge. We only see in one sense, provide communication to that MPA manager. Where is the local communities, the fishermen? They know many, they have many experience, even in preservation of the ecosystem, the biodiversity. How we can add something so they will think that they are involved, they are engaged, they are with us.
No.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I would like to say about there are some ways, and you surely use it in your MPAs. One of them is local ecological knowledge that was developed. Well, I use it as a part of MPA Adapt project, a former project that was focused on climate change. And now on a follow-up project, MPA Engaged is used as well to gain the knowledge from local fishermen, from divers and boat operators to see how they feel the environment change, their fish yield or something else, which is more, I would like, qualitative than quantitative. The quantitative is a little bit tricky because it's based on their feeling how the fish stock was, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. But it make connections with the local community, and we give them power, we give them space to express, and we say, your knowledge is something that we value. This is something that is crucial for us to be able to manage better the park. But what I would like to say that sometimes it's tricky because it's time consuming. And you have one questionnaire that you can fill in 15 minutes. But at the end, you have a coffee with a fisherman that take you 1.5 hours at least, talking about politics and everything. And you really need to listen. And they won't just sit down and say, okay, so when do you want 1950? Okay, then which species? No, first it's like, oh, you never called me. Why are you calling me? Nothing will change. I know you won't call me again. So, and this is tricky because you need to call them again. And when your project ends, then we just go to another project with another topic, and then we forgot about them. And then after 2 years, you got again something similar, and then you call, oh, do you remember me? We spoke 2 years ago. Would you like to come and have a coffee? And they will say, why didn't you call me 2 years, during this time? And said, yo, I have another project. So it's like, so in this time you didn't need my expertise. So I would like to say that we need to keep that in mind, that it's a long-term process, and that if we want to have them on board, we need to invest it regardless of any project. This is the point.
Yeah, but I think it's a key thing that we'll take note of, that the traditional local ecological knowledge is absolutely key if we are talking about talking the same language. Embarking the community of stakeholders should start from having them on board when designing the approach. And I think systematically, even though it will involve a lot of coffee and time spent talking about politics, for you, the managers on site, it's certainly key. If the point, as we said, in scaling up is to embark beyond the boundary of the sole staff of the MPA, yes, you will drink coffee and get the best of the traditional ecological knowledge to insert it in the approach.
Because if you invest in building those long-term relationships, so you have that continuity, that relationship built on trust and listening, and and it's not stop-start, because that is disrespectful, actually. But if you invest in those relationships, ultimately you will reap the benefits, you will reap the dividend of those relationships, so that your protected area management practices are more efficient. You won't keep repeating problems, you won't keep having to confront the same problems. So it becomes a much healthier and progressive process. But yeah, absolutely, it takes so much time, but it's worth the investment.
Yes, thank you. Better spending time drinking coffee than putting fines.
Merci. Bon, rapidement. Donc, ce que Madame évoquait tout à l'heure, ça relève effectivement de la cogestion, c'est très important. Et je voudrais aller encore plus loin dans l'idée d'associer les partenaires, les usagers de l'espace. C'est que nous avons essayé déjà à l'époque où moi j'étais à Porcro, on a essayé de faire des formations, et dans les formations qui étaient pour les agents du parc, il y avait aussi qui bénéficiaient de la formation, il y avait les plongeurs, il y avait les pêcheurs, il y avait les plaisanciers qui bénéficiaient de la même formation. Et à tour de rôle, chacun apportait à tout le monde dans la formation. C'était un grand groupe et chacun apportait à tout le monde, mais tout le monde était bénéficiaire. Ils étaient dans la formation. On n'avait pas dit aux pêcheurs, vous allez nous informer sur les poissons que vous attrapez. Non, on a fait venir des formateurs qui ont formé les pêcheurs et l'équipe. Donc, on était tous dans le même bateau, en fait. Et j'adhère complètement à ce que vous disiez sur le temps passé aux pêcheurs. Nous, à Porcro, au départ, on a fait énormément de réglementations et de chartes sur la pêche. Pourquoi? Le pastis, le café et le démaillage des filets sur le bateau des pêcheurs. Et là, on crée une vraie relation. Et avec cette vraie relation, après les pêcheurs, ils disent, OK, carte blanche, on vous fait confiance. Parce qu'on sait que vous n'êtes pas que des cols blancs dans les bureaux.
Yeah, just I would like to remark one issue in terms of it's not about time, it's about the right institution that engage with these people. If you are a project that is a shooting star that then is over in 2 years' time, this is not the right institution to have this kind of relation. You need institutions that are able to deal with these stakeholders and with this community on a long-term perspective. So it is the municipality, it is the protected area. It's not the task of a project. The project can support building the institutional framework where this dialogue happen. So you cannot, let's say, skip because the institution is not ready, it's not strong, it's not there. So we do through a project because this is not sustainable, it's not going to work. We need to develop institutions on the ground that are able to engage permanently and on a long-term basis with all these stakeholders. Otherwise, we are lost.
Yeah, okay. We're almost done. We almost finished. Yeah, yeah.
I think that
MedPAN. En fait, on finit vite cette session et on vous laisse. Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a misunderstanding. We are not yet done, but in a few minutes. Yeah, no, but I thought you were you were trying to promote your session to. Bye. But we have run out of time. Atef.
Yes, Pierre, just to inform the participants here that Mrs. Paloma Pacheco from Biodiversity Foundation from Spain has shared the link on interesting workshop on capacity building strategy for managers and users of marine protected areas with Natura 2000 network. And the link is there, and she is keen also to share any information about this for whom is interested.
But it's really good, thank you, and it will be broadly very important. Well, like this thing we got to get, and I guess in this effort for better coordinating capacity building initiatives beyond knowing about the needs, not so as we said the needs of the MPA, but also in an inclusive approach the needs of their stakeholders, communities who have a role to play in the everyday management also. But also to know more about the initiatives, the existing tools that are already here, to be able also to see how this match or doesn't match enough to the needs and what needs to be done. Logically, I think what we will need to do as a capacity building community will be indeed also to reflect on this. Last, yes.
Second, so maybe I didn't see CSOs
Yes.
here because when Mr. talk about who will do this job with the community, it's CSOs. They are very near on the field. And for the last question, what are the key partnership needs? I think that we should have a kind of platform where we can gather all the stakeholders, they can discuss, but we should think about how it will be, this platform, and how it will be sustainable, because there are many platforms and they are dead. So it is a kind of a good tool to gathering all the stakeholders.
Absolutely, and I think this is another big point. As shown in the initiative of the MBPC with the platform, your platform on resources, what I was mentioning earlier with this idea of a joint catalog of training that we want to coordinate MedPAN, I think other tools are needed to bring together the resources and share them among all those who need them. We want to know about the needs. Okay, here we have a tool and a joint effort for collecting the needs across the Med. And whoever is implementing a training, IUCN, VVF, MedPAN, EUROPARC can use this tool. But we should base now on tools that we share, because we are losing too much and we are not sustainable enough. And also, it's a matter of visibility. I think you, Mr. Fuda, said in a previous phase of this roadmap process that there are many resources. But where are they? Where are they? How can they better reach their target? And I think at some point we need this kind of joint initiatives to sustain them beyond projects, to say, okay, you want to know where are the training, go on the MedPAN website. You want to know about the resources, go on MBPC. And we need to reflect between all of us for this. Yeah, it shouldn't be. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. One word.
We need to think about the future needs, because certainly this roadmap will exist for several years now, and we expect that to be aligned with the post-2020 global biodiversity, whatever. So we need to think about what kind of future need. Having said that, and we have to learn from the pandemic situation. If situation get worse, it's just the only way is through online webinars, because not many people are happy at all about it. So this is a kind of action to finally. I would love to see this initiative extend to the southern part of the Mediterranean.
Yes, but this is when talking about inclusive, of course, the Mediterranean, we do not forget that
They need priority be given to.
We are talking about the Mediterranean as a whole. Yeah, it's very clear. And on the use of technologies, yes, at least this COVID pandemic got us to think out of the box. And to invent new approaches. I think we are all testing them these days and find out that a lot can be done. For example, I just finished on this. When developing training that we had to reconsider online, we found out that a lot of the theoretical component of trainings can be done online, and what is practical and in the field can be kept for the field. But so we can have these hybrid approaches. We can design MOOC, because for scaling up, it will be needed to have such approaches also. I would like to thank you, even though we were a small group. I think there were some ideas here that are focusing us under this recommendation on some very clear direction, and in particular, the one to try to reach out communities of stakeholders, which is making the challenge even bigger, but which is certainly a must for making this recommendation effective. Thank you all. We are late.